Where'd Heather go? She's cold.
She's in there.
Heather really did a terrific job in explaining what went down. We've approved structures, we approved a timeline, and there's certain conditions that relate to food, distribution of food and merchandise. There's certain rules there, and we appreciate your conditions about that. It turns into a whole different thing when you have camping and food with regard to health department permits, and that's just a whole big donut right there. So we appreciate you working with us with regard to that. That's an important piece. But we do appreciate you, and again, a city team came together and approved you being here. So be happy to answer any questions, and I'll turn it over to my friend Carl.
Thanks, Kevin.
I'll be brief. Thank you for the opportunity. As Kevin indicated, this space is very complex as far as rules and regulations and the laws that are on the book. Unlike Reynolds Park, which was less complex, and we were able to come to a much quicker negotiated occupation for the group there. When the group came here last Tuesday time period, we, from city staff, took several days and took our time and due diligence to kind of look at what the issues were before engaging that conversation again, because we wanted to have it a meaningful conversation and not confrontational. So we got an understanding of what the rules and regulations were, began those discussions this week, and strictly from a police perspective, I won't comment on a parks perspective, but a permit process, however that is defined, and I think there's a definition of that happened today, in the police perspective is much better than a no permit process, especially in a space that is complicated with structures and all kinds of things. It allows for definition and kind of fitting between the lines, which help keep the site space and available for all people, which this is a place for all people. So the kind of guidelines that were talked through and that were agreed to for the permit, I think were compromised to create kind of a platform with as little regulation as possible, because once you get into camping sites and tents and cooking and all those other things, the rules and regulations and types of permits needed just keep compounding and adding up, and there's fees and such like that. So in that compromise, we came to a permit process that had kind of the least amount of permits, and I don't think there's any fees associated with it, or a little bit. So that was where we came from a city side and agencies to try to cooperatively work so that you could do what you want to do, kind of working with the city on the space. So I'm thankful. I hope that the relationship can continue in a cooperative manner, and you can get your message across as you see fit. And it is an open and continuing dialogue between staff. So I'm also available for questions if you have those for us.
Just one question.
For myself or for Kevin?
I guess either. So it's my understanding from what you just said that Occupy Madison or Paul or whoever are not going to be required to procure or rent any of the stuff that's normally needed for
On the mic, please.
Sorry. All right. I was holding it.
Yeah, sorry, I was facing in as opposed to out. It's my understanding from what was just said that Occupy Madison or Paul or whoever is not going to be required to procure any of the stuff that's normally needed for urban camping, like we saw at Walkerville, like the portas, food infrastructure, water, things like that. That's more or less off on the side with what was worked out.
The Walkerville campaign did acquire all those permits, so they went through all that and acquired all the health department permits. we're not in that situation, so we haven't required that. So you're correct in stating we're not asking you to have those type of permits. Because again, it gets into a whole, I think Carl said it really very succinctly, it becomes a whole number different of layers that happen that are requirements and permits that are required when you start going into health department regulations.
Jim?
I have a question for the officer. Yes, is there a process by which we can file criminal charges against the permit applicant for stealing money out of our jar to pay for the permit without the consent of our finance committee? I'm serious about this. Without the consent of our finance committee and without the consent of the General Assembly. The person who applied for this permit stole money for us to pay for the application without our consent. I'm sorry.
Anybody that would like to camp without a permit, go over there and see what they have.
So I'm interested in knowing about how if we decided, we probably won't, but there is a possibility we might decide collectively that we would like to pursue criminal charges against this person for theft, for petty theft.
Sure, there is a process for theft. So what I would suggest is the group makes that decision, and when that decision is made, can I finish? If there's a decision made to move forward with a complaint, there's officers going by, they can be contacted for that, or the police department's just right on the other side of the Capitol Square where, on Carroll Street there.
Can I see that real quick so I can stop this? Can I see this so I can stop this?
Are you asking a question?
I just have something to say.
If you're asking a question of their current speakers, you can.
I'm stating about accusing the people that are giving you permission to be here of hurting you.
All right. Well, I'm sorry. We could have open discussion about this later, and right now we're keeping this limited to questions from our current guests. We're on a little bit of a time. Oh. Could you? We'll ask that you respect the process for now. The GA has a process. Okay. So do we have any more questions for our guests?
Some of us got here a little late, and so we would just like to know if we'll be able to continue occupying this space. I'm sorry, we were late, so we're asking each other, and none of us knows the answer.
She had a question. Let's answer that one first, okay? The permit that Paul got is until Wednesday the 26th, a week from now at noon. The next day after that is when Freak Fest starts to set up. Freak Fest is a huge, giant Halloween celebration where they close off State Street and you have to pay money to be on your own street here. And some of us don't even want to be anywhere near that because it's a lot of freakiness that isn't too pleasant. So we don't know what we're going to do at that point or after Freak Fest. We don't know if we're going to come back here or seek another location. It's all up in the air. We don't know what we're doing.
Okay. So we have next in line. We have you for a question to our guests.
All right. Please, before you accuse anybody of stealing or anything else, I would like to ask the question of, do you know what happens if you try camping here without a permit? And if you would like to try camping without a permit, you can see how the city reacts, and you can go camp over there. And if nothing else, I'm willing to pay money to feed the homeless, and that's my purpose here.
Thank you. So do we have any more questions for our guests before we close this off? Yes. He's been online for a bit now, and then, okay.
My question is not directly pertained to this, but it is related. Last February, when I came here, the Capitol basement was open for homeless people during the daytime. Is there any chance of reopening that up, especially under the circumstances the library is going to be closing? There's going to be a lot of very cold people this morning.
That would be really cool if we could do that.
I don't know if we can speak to that directly right now, but thank you for voicing the concern. Or she was on next, and then Bro. These are still questions for the guests.
In terms of changing this location and communicating with you guys in terms of which locations, which permits we do need to acquire, depending on whether this location closes, and possibly moving during Freak Fest and after Freak Fest. How is our communication going to work in terms of online? I feel like it's very, very important to continue to communicate on Facebook. There was a time I came downtown, I just didn't know where you guys were about a week ago, so I was like, well, Madison doesn't really have an occupation, I'm going to Chicago. So in terms of making this very public, like, I feel like we should have a lot more people than this here tonight, because this is a very powerful issue and this is a very powerful time to affect change. So in terms of putting this stuff online somewhere, do we have somebody in charge of that, and are these two guys willing to work with that with us, or are you guys just responsible for this location, or would we, if we are changing locations, would we continue to communicate with you guys? It's kind of loaded.
It depends what location may be chosen. If you stay in the central city, you're stuck with me. If you go to a facility that is a park facility, you're stuck with, in the central city, you're stuck with Kevin and me. As far as the dialogue, we and city staff have been very open with that dialogue, working with the group, trying to come to a cooperative agreement wherever you may choose to go. I don't see that changing in the current climate we have. We've been very open to that dialogue. Should you choose to go to another place that is of your choice, if you want to give us a heads up, that's your choice. We'll work with you to try to work through some of the hurdles like we have with this site and the previous site. So if you choose not to, that's your choice. We'll still have to work through any hurdles that that site may have. So we're here. We've given our cards to many of the group members. We both work out of the city-county building Monday through Friday during the day. We're very easily to find. So, please feel free to make that contact and keep the dialogue open.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you. Another question for our guest from Bro.
So, Occupy Madison, kind of a loud event, group of people who are working to cause attention to be brought to the issues that are here. Oftentimes in front of businesses, etc. We do protest, we do march, etc. What I'm looking to get is perhaps a general verbal agreement that the Parks Department and the Police Department will continue to work with Occupy Madison after this permit, which again we didn't sign up for, has expired, and general do no harm agreement to the occupation, provided we generally follow most rules and don't get violent and the like.
That's a loaded question. I can just reiterate what I've said. What we've both said is that the city is willing to work cooperatively with you. Just because we have put an end date on this, we call it a phase of this occupation of next Wednesday at noon, we don't see that as an end necessarily to your movement. There is something else that conflicts with that in this space. So we have an obligation because of that event to make that event work. So if you choose to, say, move to the other side of the square where the event isn't, we'll work with you there. Or if you choose to move somewhere else during that time period. We just have an obligation in this site with that other event during that time.
Alright, so taking like off my hats with my point positions and stuff, and my personal question is, do you guys have any thoughts on if we were to move somewhere else, do you think one place is better or other? Just wondering.
Any hints?
Obviously nearby.
We just noticed there's a lot of grass across the street.
Oh! Is that your jurisdiction, sir?
Of course we say in jest. But, you know, I follow up on what Carl says, you know, from the start. We appreciate the communication, the collaboration, the discussion, and the compromise that we both have shared in moving forward in the occupation at Reynolds Park and now here. We will continue to do that. That's who we are. That's how we'll roll through this process, and we'll be there with you. We just, you know, we asked in respect, you know, with regard to how the permit was put down for Wednesday, because we have a permit used for Freak Fest, that you respect that and work with us on that. There's going to be a lot of people here, and you know, there's a lot of police resources that are used up and down the street, and you know, it is about public safety and all of that. So we would appreciate it and respect if you would respect that. But again, we'll always be working with you.
Noah. Hi. So however you feel about us, and however we feel about the permit, I want to make sure that you understand the distinction, you and the organizations that you represent, understand the distinction between Paul as an actor and the General Assembly as an actor. Because regardless of who filed the permit, he is not responsible for what we do, and we're not responsible for what he does. And I want to make sure that you two understand that.
We both do very clearly, and I think over these several weeks we have come to appreciate how your organization works, and we clearly understand that what Paul did as an individual doesn't speak for the group. We would hope that the conditions of the permit that Paul as an individual obtained today meet most of the concerns and issues with the group and could be worked with. That would be our hope. But we understand that he does not speak for your group, and that there is that conflict. So I don't know if I said that clearly enough.
No, just to follow up on that. You know,
Are you in
after
line?
the meeting, I took the opportunity to speak to the on-site delegation.
I'm just going to film, and then I'll be behind you.
That was there at the meeting, and because we heard, you know, the site committee. Thank you. Because we heard that concern, but we're reaching out and communicating, and one of the things that we wanted to make sure that the conditions within the permit were reasonable, and there was consensus in our conversation that they were reasonable, and we would hope that based on that reasonableness, you would respect that. There is a certain flexibility of stuff being here that we permitted, and I hope, as my opening statements were, that that shows that we're working with you.
Okay, so I think a lot of people's concerns about moving and being able to come back to this space after Freak Fest has a lot to do with how Chief Tubbs told everyone that if they leave the building, they could come back the next day, and then the building was locked down and they put in metal detectors, and there was just a process of many months. And I know that's a completely different department. So my question is, if we, before Freak Fest, pack everything up and exit this area, move for a few days, after Freak Fest, there's not going to be anything blocking us from applying for permits or applying to be back in this space. I just want to know, I just want to get you on the record of saying if we respectfully leave, you will respectfully give us the opportunity to come back after Frig Fest.
Wilson.
A good question, Miles, and I appreciate that question because I want to clarify one thing. The end next Wednesday at noon is just for the belongings here. While the Freak Fest event is being created, people can be here. It's the belongings and the structures that we're seeking to be moved. So if people would still choose to be here during that time, that is absolutely acceptable. And after the event is done, I can honestly say, and Kevin can back me up here, we'll be here after the event, that the city has no plan of preventing you from coming back. We would hope that you would look at a permit process because we think that is a good thing. But again, the group will do as the group needs to do. But we won't prevent you from coming back here.
Yay. Yay.
Thank you. Other questions for the guests?
I got, as I'm kind of looking at everybody, I think everybody's just got one question. It's really, really important. And as a sign of good faith, I think the only question is, what night are you two going to come pull a night in the info booth?
I'll make a donation.
Thank you.
I'll let Kevin take the month of December.
Okay, so with that, I don't see any other questions for the guests.
Go with the camera. It's more of a statement.
Do you want me to film it? I got you.
Sure.
I mentioned this early on, but we would appreciate if you would respect the process with regard to the permit. And again, it's not about your right to assemble. Rock it out. Do it. We understand it. We appreciate it. It's really about when the stuff shows up. Okay? So the permit is really about the stuff, not your right. And I really want to get that out because we understand, we appreciate what you're all doing. But it's about when the stuff shows up, and then there's public safety and other things that kind of wrap around that. So we would really appreciate you to respect that process and us collaborating and working with you like we have from Reynolds, and us waiving, standard park rules that have been in place for decades, and then working with you here that we understand, we respect you. We would ask that you respect that process, and whoever that is, that there is someone, and then we'll go through the permit process and work with you, continue to work with you. So I wanted to make sure I got that out. So,
thank you. Okay, so any other questions for the guests before I close the stack for questions and our guests can go on their way? Or hang out if they so choose.
I'm cold, man. I don't know about you.
You're at 99%. You guys are 99%ers too.
I'll make this really quick. My name is DB. I just wanted to say to both of you gentlemen, we are the 99%. The numbers may not reveal that. This is a teaching process, and this is a global process, and we're learning from other sites everywhere this information is coming in. We appreciate your participation and your respect towards what we're trying to do in a democratic process. And thank you.
I just want to say, being the only person here that Carl's probably put handcuffs on, I really respect the man, and I'm willing to work with him. And I thank him and Kevin. Sorry. Thank both of you for being here, and thank you for having a discussion with us.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so sounds like that's all closed. What I had on the table earlier was a proposal to open this for discussion, which did not have a clear majority in favor of reopening this for discussion. It sounds like there is some strong sentiment in favor of reopening the agenda. I will remind everybody that we do have an opportunity both at the facilitation committee meetings and when we ratify the agenda to add proposals and discussion items to the agenda.